Welcome back. Another week of Three Ball Walk. Bob, Eddie, I'm Julio, and a couple things to talk about. Exciting. The regionals were announced. They'll start tomorrow. If you're watching this, right when the show comes on. If not, they'll be started. They have already started. And
if we get this on by Thursday,
it'll be tomorrow. Well, are some of them starting Thursday though, right?
I thought some of them may start
Thursday. A couple of them start Thursday.
Unless you're watching this Friday, then it was yesterday that it started.
Either way, it's this weekend.
It's this weekend.
It is, and
interesting notes about that.
What your thoughts? First thought.
First of all, there's not a team west of Texas hosting. So there you go. For
Texas Tech and Texas A&M are the 4 and 5 seed,
and TCU
is down.
So I'm not sure which one of those, TCU or Texas Tech, is further west.
But that's the farthest west.
But that's the furthest west you're going to go to play. So that makes interesting things that we talked about with Kyle last week about regionalizing the regionals, and they weren't very regionalized if everybody from the West
and
Coast.
The super regionals are, you got Florida FSU, you got Clemson, South Carolina, you got Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and amazing how those seeds work out that way. Huh?
Isn't it amazing how that suddenly the best teams all end up at 1 and 8 is Florida and Florida State instead of Florida State being 7. Yeah, it's kind of.
And it's funny because I'm reading about how after the finish they had, how did the Florida Gators get the #1 seed overall?
I still don't understand that one either.
What does it matter? If they'd have been the 2 seed, FSU would have been the 15. If they'd have been the 4 seed, FSU would have been the 13.
Probably.
So what difference is it?
I don't think it matters that much. That's one of the things I think we need to get away from these national seeds again, because
if you're the 8, they're going to pair who they want at 9, even though they should be 13.
But
or
how
14.
do they decide? I mean, is there
a committee? There's a
I
committee.
think these are the top 8, and from there, once they get the top 8, they go, okay, #1, who do we want them in the super regional with the next group? #2, and you could be number 10, but they're going to make you 16. You could be 14, they'll make you 9, just so you pair up with that correct one. That's the way it appears to me.
And that's the way it looks. Certainly that's the way it looks. And there was an article by an Oregon State coach who was very critical of them being left out when they took 2 out of 3 from Washington and 2 out of 3 from UCLA. Both of them got in, they didn't. So, yeah, and their RPI was higher than both those teams, and yet somehow
North Carolina 20 RPI.
Yeah, they got left out.
ACC and got left out.
They got left out. So 8 teams. Yeah, I think it's 8 got in from the SEC, and all 8 are hosting.
Right.
No SEC team got in that's not
after hosting. You either made the top 16 or you didn't get in.
Or you didn't get in.
Which was Alabama and Kentucky were probably the 2 that were there on the.
It cost the Alabama coach's job. He resigned.
Right.
Because of that one game. I mean, if they beat Florida, they're probably in. If they're in, then he's probably still coach. So it's an interesting time in college baseball to see what will happen.
And I'll tell you the other thing I found rather interesting is about, and I call it just pompousness, is 20 minutes after the seeding show started, during the seeding show, I want to say it was from 12 to 12:30. At 12:20, Texas announces that Garrido has resigned.
He's resigned.
During we're not going to be. We finished the year 23 and 35. Our team's terrible.
But we're going to be nationally recognized.
So we're going to be recognized during the selection show by firing our coach.
Yep.
And decided to step down, helping. I mean, they've been irrelevant for the last few years, but I thought that was a rather classless move right there.
That's Texas.
But it's Texas.
It's Texas. I mean, that's what Texas does. Texas thinks that Texas is more valuable than any other school in the country. And pretty much they've been irrelevant in most sports for the last half decade, or at least a decade.
But they got the Bucks.
But they do have the support, and the people in Texas still think Texas is the school to go to, which is kind of funny that you now have, in baseball, you have 3 other schools that are above them all the time. I mean, I would take Rice and Texas and TCU as a program above where Texas has been the last decade.
And in football?
Certainly Houston,
Baylor,
Houston.
I mean,
they have
not
really,
Baylor anymore.
Well, Baylor was.
It was
until they decided to not pull an FSU and actually do something. I said that out loud, didn't I? I'm sorry, you FSU fans. I'm sorry. So we Florida fans may not be too far behind you there if things continue the way they're going in some areas. So we have all those things happening. But, you know, I look at that and go, how in the world do you just have the SEC teams and the ACC teams hosting? Of course, we've got Florida has an ACC team and Georgia Tech coming as their 2 seed. And so
FSU didn't get an SEC team.
No.
You see that?
Not surprised by that. I mean, they
Really?
No.
Well, you can't if they're all hosting.
They're all hosting.
You're right. There's no 2 seed, 3 seed, or 4 seed.
There's nobody else to send there.
There was no SEC team to send anywhere.
That's right. So they're either hosting or they're not there. They're not playing. And that's one of the things I think that's going to make the SEC both good and bad. I mean, if all 8 of those win, then, you know, some of those teams are going to end up playing each other like they did in softball with Georgia and Florida playing each other.
They've tried not to. I mean, the Clemson's playing South Carolina, Florida's playing FSU. I mean,
yeah, and that's one of the things that I despise about the way they
A&M
do
is
it.
playing Texas Tech. So
Right.
It's not like they didn't. In softball, they paired a lot of them up.
Right. And you have this moment where, okay, Florida and Florida State have already played 3 times.
Right.
And I'm sure Clemson and South Carolina have played. I don't know their schedule, but I'm sure that they've played. And I think they had the same thing, a 3-game series, home and home, and a neutral site game, which is becoming a popular thing among those kind of rivals like that. Why in the world do you send Florida and Florida State against each other, Florida and Miami? And if you're going to do that, if you're O'Sullivan, why do you continue to schedule those teams when you're going to see them for the regionals?
It shows in a lot of cases. This time, I think there was a vast difference between the regular season where Florida finished and where FSU finished. But oftentimes, that 3-game series determines who's going where. Which team's going to get to host that Super Regional? Or are the Gators going to Tallahassee for the Super Regional? Or
recent history, it's always been coming here.
And when they got announced, we got our regional and we're going, then all of a sudden they showed they're being paired. And did you see them in the background? Every guy with a long face, like, we've got to go to Florida. It was.
Well, I think they don't want to come here any more than we would want to go play at Florida State or go play at Miami.
Right.
You know, you got to play a rival. I mean, I think that's what hurt Florida in the softball Super Regional against Georgia is you're playing a team that's used to coming here every other year. And in this case, they're not going to be, Florida State's not going to be intimidated by coming to play here at the MAC. They've been here. They've played here every year.
They've got a little retaliation. They lost 3 games
They've lost
to
3
them
games
this
to
year.
them. You've already beat them 3 times. You know how their hitters are. We know how your hitters are. The only thing difference is in those midweek rivalry games, neither side pitches their weekend rotation. So you haven't seen those pitchers. But you've seen the teams. You know how they play. You know how they hit. You've got plenty of tape.
In a lot of cases. In the Clemson, South Carolina case, they actually played it over the weekend. So you did get in the Miami, Florida case, you threw your weekend guys. Only Florida FSU are pretty much, even though they do the home and neutral, they don't do it on 3 days in a row like South Carolina and Clemson do.
Did they play 3 in a row?
They played 3 in a row, but then it was at one place. And
they did move it around.
They moved it around.
That's close enough. They could do that there in South Carolina. Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic. What's going to happen there of the top 8 seeds? I don't think Florida played well enough. I don't know that Florida has enough offense. If they pitch it well, certainly they're going to be good. But they usually pitch it well. They're usually in the games because of their pitching.
Their leading hitter's been out for the last 3 weeks. He's supposed to be back this weekend.
I mean, he's not going to have faced live pitching though.
No. By the time the Super Regional comes around, I don't think there's anyone in that regional that can be Florida twice.
I don't think so twice. No. But you never know. Weird things happen.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you lose that first game, and now all of a sudden you've got to go doubleheader, and offensively you go in a slump, and weird things happen. And anything can happen in a short series, and a regional is a short series. And
I think that's one of the reasons why, which was interesting. And I don't know, I was actually talking to someone at my office about it. And the Sunday game, the championship game against Texas A&M, I don't think I've ever seen a coach care less about winning a game that meant the championship than O'Sullivan did on throwing different pitcher every inning. He didn't care. But basically that's what he's doing. He's making sure his guys are ready for what mattered. And you said it last week.
I said it last week.
The
most meaningless tournament is the SEC tournament to a team that's already number 1 seed. It didn't change a lick. It didn't change anything for Florida. Clearly they didn't play well. They played okay enough to get to the championship
game. And because of the way that the seedings fell, I truly believe that because A&M, what did it do for A&M? They went from number 2 in the country to number 4 seed, but basically that's because they wanted to get the right pairing.
Yeah, they wanted them in Texas school. I think that's the way the committee does it, and I think they don't have anybody to answer to. They don't have to come out and say why they did it. There's no formula. There's no criteria. There's a group of guys who are sitting there, and I think that there's somebody. I mean, this is just me personally speaking. I think there's somebody there from the network saying this is who we want to play, because those network matchups mean a whole lot. You're going to watch a game. I mean, you know, if it's Florida State, people are going to watch. If it's Texas Tech, people are going to watch. If it's Texas and
Clemson, South Carolina,
Clemson and Rice, for instance. I mean, it has something to go with the College World Series, but you're not watching it that much.
And UCal Santa Barbara wound up the number 2 seed, and
somewhere I don't remember which one.
They brought them. Well, I guess they had to bring all the West.
Everybody had to come east or south. I mean, you know, and that in terms, Virginia, I think, is the furthest northern team hosting. And
has that happened before like that, where you see all the teams come east?
Never. They have always, whether it's Cal State Fullerton or UCLA or
somebody out west, Oregon State, somebody has always hosted out west, at least a couple of teams.
Yeah, and up north, Michigan sometimes does.
Yeah.
Michigan didn't get in, and Ohio State did, which I saw there was some griping there.
Yeah, there's always going to be griping. That's the thing is, there's always going to be griping because you have a group of people who behind closed doors, and it's kind of interesting that the last team in was South Alabama.
Right.
And guess who was the chairman of the committee?
Oh, was it?
The athletic director
at USA.
USA. I'm not saying that anything was done that wasn't correct, because I don't know USA's.
And where they're going to Tallahassee.
I think they are going to Tallahassee, which is not an easy thing, but at least you're in.
Yeah,
you're in and you're playing, and that I guess, you know, I don't know if they won their conference and had to get in. I don't think.
And
they
then
did.
Next week is the draft.
Is it next week?
I mean, today's the 1st, so that would be
right.
Next week is the 8th. That's usually when it is, right?
Yeah.
It's
different this year though. It's like before. It's in between. It's not during the College World Series, which it used to be.
Correct, because they're actually back a week, because the regionals would have been played last week usually, and the super regionals are the first week in June, and then the College World Series. Now we're looking at regionals being the first week in June.
Right.
They're not going to do super regionals until the 11th or 12th or something like that. Well, the draft, so it's not occurring at the beginning of the College World Series. It's occurring right before
midweek,
the super, right before the super regionals.
Thursday draft.
Yeah.
So there you go, another thing made for TV, so we can listen to the pundits for 5 hours about why this makes a great choice. I have right-handed pitcher from Del Mar High School in California.
I have yet to see the projected first round picks.
Well,
since
no one knows
since last January.
Because unlike the NFL, Major League Baseball scouts keep everything close to their vest because they don't want anybody else to know the ones they're going to pick.
Right.
And so it's, you know, you might have a consensus number one like there was when Bryce Harper was there, but a lot of times it's whatever an organization, you know how it is, they think this is the guy we want, and everybody else may be going, what are you picking that guy for? But hey, we see something nobody else sees.
Right.
We'll know if they're right in about 5 or 6 years.
And then when they do, a lot of those guys will turn out. Bryce Harper definitely turned out.
He's not a bad pick. I think that whoever scouted him did a pretty good job.
And we'll switch over to Major League Baseball when we come back after the break. And I know we hit a long time there on college baseball, but different things. I mean, you know, the Cubs finally lost an Arrieta start.
We'll talk about that when we come back.
And Jose Fernandez. And one of the things I wanted, the pitcher of the month in the National League for May. And I saw the stats with Kershaw and Jose Fernandez, and it's ridiculous how Jose Fernandez can go 6-0 with a 1.24 ERA with 65 strikeouts and 11 walks in a month, and get blown away for pitcher of the month.
Well, I think we can talk about that. We'll make that argument.
Real quick, this weekend in Jacksonville at the Quality Inn on Commonwealth, the monthly card show by Jacksonville Sports Cards starts at 9 o'clock. This is the last time it'll be at the Quality Inn, so come out and see us and say hi, please.
Make Bob give you a deal.
I'll give you a
play
deal.
ball, buy a card from him, come buy something, make his day, make his weekend. We'll be right back.